Many of us around the world are united in our experience of social isolation and social inclusion. But for many in your workplace, social isolation isn't something that happened in the past few weeks. It's part of their day-to-day experience. I'm Dr. Jonathan. I design inclusive companies for the 21st century, and I'm on a mission to help 1 million people like you to make your workplace inclusive. Get your pen and paper ready because we're having a shared experience, but for some of us, it's not a new experience. This is the second in a 3-part series about what social exclusion means for diversity and inclusion. In the first part, we spoke about how social exclusion was leading to social inclusion. Here, we're going to talk about why social isolation is not a new experience in the workplace. Lack of human contact, feelings of isolation, missing that personal connection with others. Based on my conversations and my observations, these are typical of what people are experiencing right now and what people are sharing right now. It's being viewed as being authentic and receiving a lot of support. People are saying that they'll be there for you. Call if you need anything. Organizations are making their services available to you for free to show just how much they care about you. It looks like a celebration of human compassion and authenticity. But I'm reminded that social exclusion isn't new, and I rarely see this level of compassion and authenticity around this topic. Lack of human contact, feelings of isolation, missing that personal connection with others. These are key phrases that I encounter all the time from so-called underrepresented or minority groups. I've got so much data to show that these are the everyday experiences of people who are marginalized in organizations. So let's talk about being social. Think about your social network at work. People you have to communicate with in order to do your job effectively. Let's call this a formal social network. Now let's think of your informal social network. Let's think of people that you know, like, and trust at work. Research suggests that you're likely to share characteristics with your informal social network due to homophily. Homophily is an organizing principle that suggests that as people, we prefer to associate with others that are similar to ourselves. Birds of a feather flock together. This all seems quite normal, right? Well, here's the thing. Research suggests that having an effective informal social network is crucial for career success. A large part of that is because important information moves very quickly through an informal social network. There's a new job opportunity that you'd be perfect for. I want to give you a heads up. Let's talk about it over lunch. There's a high-profile project that would take you to the next level and set you up for that senior role that you want. It hasn't been announced yet, but I've suggested your name. Let's talk about it over drinks. You messed up. Big time. Your boss's boss hates what you did last week. It's not your fault. You couldn't have known. But listen, there's 3 things that you need to do to fix it. I've already done one of them for you. Let's talk about the rest over dinner. If you've heard this or any variation of what I've just said, you probably have the privilege of benefiting from an effective informal social network. If what I've said sounded amazing but has never ever happened to you in any way, shape or form, then you probably don't have that privilege. And it is a privilege. And that means you experience relative disadvantage. Now, some of you are thinking, well, that's not really privilege. Some people work really hard. I work really hard to develop my network. I'm friendly, I'm helpful. I proactively create these opportunities that come to me. And even if all of what you've just said is true, what's this got to do with social exclusion anyway? Before we talk about that, I want to talk about the importance of sharing. If you're finding us for the first time, make sure you check out the show notes. You can access these wherever you're listening to the podcast. The show notes have got details of all the reports and all the resources that are mentioned in the show. I've put this together for you so that you can go deeper into anything that we discuss here. Make sure you check out our LinkedIn group, the Element of Inclusion Community, because we're running the Lockdown Challenge. It's a quick and easy way to do some practical things to help you to get closer to creating an inclusive workplace. Every week we set a new challenge, task, or exercise, and it's designed to help you in a pragmatic and practical way. This week's challenge is related to this show. Now let's get back to talking about why social isolation is not a new experience in the workplace. We've talked about formal and informal social networks. We've even given examples of why informal social networks matter. But what has any of this got to do with social exclusion? It's a consistent finding in the research that people from underrepresented groups struggle to benefit from these powerful informal social networks within organizations. They're excluded. They're socially excluded. And this explains some of the challenges experienced in the workplace. Underrepresented groups don't share the same benefits and advantages. That's one of the 3 biggest problems that organizations experience on their inclusion journey, and it's related to potential. They struggle to create a culture of inclusion where everyone can reach their potential. As a reminder, here we define inclusion as a systematic business strategy where everyone shares the same benefits and advantages. Sharing the same benefits and advantages, it shows up in different ways. I'm talking about social networks, but we haven't even spoken about public spaces, organizations, or other institutions. This really matters because previously we suggested that you think of social exclusion as a form of social isolation, except it's beyond the control of the individual. We've also suggested that social isolation is the non-participation of an individual or a group in society's mainstream institutions. If we bring this back to social networks, let's look at the informal social network. If we've got someone who isn't participating and the reason they're not participating is beyond their control, it's easy for us to see that that's a form of social exclusion. It's one thing to experience this, but what happens when people share these experiences? Well, for some, right now, it's considered to be authentic. It's considered to be vulnerable. They're being celebrated. For others, it's seen as complaining. It's frowned upon. Can you guess what would happen if someone from a minority group went on social media talking about how they were struggling with social exclusion or the experience of being isolated? Can you guess what would happen if someone from a minority group spoke publicly at work about how they were struggling with social exclusion or the experience of being isolated? Well, we don't need to guess, do we? We already know. Think about employee resource groups, staff networks, or whatever you prefer to call them. One of the reasons that they're often preoccupied with the social aspect of inclusion, safe spaces, events, is that they're trying to address the social exclusion issues that we've just discussed here. When they do talk about it, they get the reputation of wine and wine. Wine because of all the alcohol that tends to be served at their events. And wine because discussing these issues of social exclusion is considered to be complaining. All this tells you that it's okay for people to be vulnerable. It's okay to be authentic. It's okay to share your personal experiences of the past few weeks. The thing is, there are people who experience acute forms of social isolation in the workplace, but not just for a few weeks. It's for months. It's for years, and they don't feel okay to be vulnerable. They don't feel okay to be authentic. They don't feel okay to share their personal experiences at any time. So let's wrap this up. What are the key messages here? 1. Informal social networks are crucial for career success. 2. Minority groups are often socially excluded from important informal social networks. And 3. Sharing experiences of social exclusion appears to be okay for some, but not for others. So what do you think? Do you feel comfortable sharing experiences of social exclusion beyond the past few weeks? Get in touch or leave a message. I would love to hear from you. If you want to continue the conversation, join our LinkedIn group, the Element of Inclusion Community. If you've learned something from today's show, share it with one other person that you think would benefit, and give us a 5-star review. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.